everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for joining us in Boston. It's been a great couple days, and we're excited. We understand we're the leading off sort of the tail end of the conference here. So my name's Steve Gruppioni. I manage technology partnerships for TraceLink, and you've all learned a lot about TraceLink the last few days and learned about Mint. My role with the company is where we have integration into other technology systems. We look to identify challenges that we can help solve and tackle together that typically deal with how companies work with their supply chain partners. And so in that capacity, I have the distinct pleasure of working with our team at Kinaxis and Genpact. And so with that, I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, Matthias, Leimer here. I'm the Genpact Life Sciences Supply Chain Leader. For those of you not familiar with Genpact, right, we're a large company of 100,000 people. We drive a lot of transformation for our clients through either consulting, helping you build capabilities, through re-engineering processes, putting in systems, and on the people side from a change management and org design as well. But we also help our clients through integrated operations, where we actually have cutting-edge managed services across a variety of functions, including supply chain. So where we actually run part of your operations for you. So that could be a planning function, this could be a global trade function. So it's a very innovative approach because a lot of times it's a hybrid solution. We also have the honor of being Kinaxis' longest serving system integrator. So we actually started with them over 20 years ago. And part of the partnership has been great because we don't just put the tool in place and make our clients successful. We also co-innovate, right? We look at industry-specific challenges. So over the years, we've tackled things like expiry, jurisdictional controls, new product launches that always were very unique the way it's done in life sciences. And then most recently, right, we really started talking about the collaboration topic because we saw that as a big pain point for our customers. So really happy to be here today and tell you a little bit more about what we're planning on doing.
Thank you. I'm Christy Christian. I'm a senior industry principal at Kinaxis. My role really is to specialize in that life science space and understand the needs of our industry and how our platform can solve that. If you're not familiar with Kinaxis, we're a leading advanced planning solution. We really focus on the concurrency, which means it's always running, coupled with the scenario capabilities that a planner can do without needing extensive, any coding or technical support. And then within that, we like to think of ourselves as a out-of-the-box solution that's fully configurable to the needs of each individual business. So the platform that's run at a $5 billion company is the same platform that's run at a $500 million company. It may not look the same, but the functionality is the same, so it's very scalable. We are a leading advanced planning solution. We've been in Gartner's top quadrant for the past 11 years. And this past year, we were voted customer choice. So we've had a long journey over 40 years, and we're looking forward to continuing that advancement.
All right, thank you. So many of you here in this room, you work with supply chain partners, whether that's contract manufacturers, direct material suppliers, 3PLs. Typically what we see and when we start to have conversations, though, is that understanding that how you work with those supply chain partners is typically unstructured, very manual. There's very limited digital connectivity in place. So things like a forecast, it's typically attached to an email, and it's emailed to a CMO. And then planners are spending time calling that CMO, trying to get responses, having meetings, etc. In a conversation yesterday that we were having, the person we were speaking with mentioned that their supply planners, 95% of their time is spent just trying to get responses and working with partners to get answers to questions, and only 5% is actually spent on planning. That really hit home for us because it's exactly what we're looking to address with the solutions that we're talking about. And so with these challenges that exist, my first question is to Christy. From the technology provider's perspective, what do you see as some of the common challenges that customers are dealing with in this space?
So I think you hit on a lot of it in terms of that manual planning that happens. And what we see is it's very siloed. And what that ends up causing is that we try to optimize one function at the expense of another. And we've seen that in terms of when we're trying to optimize a manufacturing plant, we produce too much inventory, or we're purchasing to get a lower cost and we have too much raw material. So as we look at how our solution starts to minimize the use of spreadsheet, reduce those silos, focus on collaboration, and really bring that data into something that is useful to drive decision.
Excellent. Yeah, and similar question for you, Matthias. If what are some of the challenges that you see?
Yeah. So the challenge we see typically are across, I would say, 3 different dimensions. There's the execution dimension, right, which is 0 to 3 months, right? A lot of PO sharing, a lot of where's my truck, right, from an advanced shipment notices, right? And it's a huge pain, right, because as you just mentioned, a lot of the time is just spent running around trying to get confirmations, right? The other dimension, which we typically see it, is in the planning horizon, right? That's usually 3 to 24 months, right? That's where really Kinaxis plays. And there, what we need is, for example, from a CMO, right? Like, what is my capacity over the next 17 months, 20 months, 24 months, right? What are the projected inventory levels, right? Are there any key constraints coming up? So you can actually model out your own planning based on some of the constraints the CMO might have. So you can identify shortfalls very quickly, right? And then the third piece, actually, which a lot of times gets overlooked, is quality, right? Quality very much cares, let's say, for a CMO, what are my CAPAs that are currently outstanding? What's the time to resolution, right? Do we have the right documentation? What is my batch documentation that I will need, right? So many, many different dimensions, right? How do companies currently handle today? Because you have to do it somehow. Like, they really throw people at it. It's a lot of spreadsheets. It's still king. Like, spreadsheets are king across all of that, but it just has gotten very, very people intensive, and the CMO structure and external supplier structure has gotten so big that it's really not sustainable anymore. So they really need to help from a technology perspective, from a process change perspective, that they can do it more sustainably going forward. And what are some of the results, right? Why is this causing pain? I think the number one is you're very, very reactionary, right? You deal with things when they blow up. You're not really proactively dealing with them, right? In some cases, you might have an ETL that you establish with 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4, because it's very time intensive to put them in place. It's very time intensive to maintain them, but we don't do it broadly, right? A lot of times the surprises come from a supplier that you didn't really expect it. So being able to do it broader, freeing up your people to actually do the planning, going through the exceptions, instead of just doing data chasing, is really at the crux of this, which is causing a lot of pain for a lot of our clients.
So before we go on, I wanted to just to jump onto what you were saying, that ability to bring that outside data in starts to transform how we're going to move our planning organizations. If you think about today and it being very siloed and less collaborative, it's very focused what is within our walls and what can we see. What you just brought up is the immediate need and the sense of urgency around bringing outside data in, and having that information along with what we have within our own system really start to shape how we plan and how we structure in those different time horizons, and move away from traditional inside-out planning to more orchestrated outside-in planning.
Great point. Thank you. Matthias, what within the life sciences segment, what kind of companies do you see as being impacted by these challenges?
Sure. No, it's a good question, because if you look at across biopharma, kind of regular pharma, if you look at med device or even generic, right, typically the value chain, how things are produced, are pretty similar, right? You have a bunch of CMOs in the mix, you have some own plants, right? You ship it around the globe a bunch of times. So we really see this applying across all of life sciences company, different sizes as well, right? Even if you're pre-revenue, right? You just have some stuff, clinical trials. Even then, you probably have some facilities that produce things for you, right? This is where recently we started the clinical trial planning solution between Kinaxis, TraceLink, and us, right? To really do the clinical space as well. But there are some unique challenges as well. If you look at med device, right? They have consigned inventory, right? Most people might not know this if they're not in a medical device company, but a hip or knee replacement is typically owned by the manufacturer of this until it's implanted into the patient. So they have a ton of inventory at their distributors, in trunk stock, at the hospitals that they still own, right? These are billions and billions of dollars, and it's very hard visibility. So there's also now, for example, an opportunity to integrate from a downstream perspective, not just upstream with the suppliers.
All right, thank you. So let's transition to talking a little bit about the solution that this collaboration is looking to bring to market here. And in the center, we have Kinaxis Maestro as the planning tool that's being used. And we have TraceLink MINT integrating into Maestro to provide the connectivity with the outside world, essentially. And then we have Genpact with years of experience helping companies manage supply chain transformation projects, being able to provide additional services and support there. A recent example of the partnership was Genpact's announcement at Kinaxis's recent Connections event in Austin, where Genpact announced the release of a clinical supply chain planning application, which you just mentioned as well, that again is functionality built on Kinaxis Maestro that's leveraging TraceLink MINT for the connectivity again with the outside world. So whether it's clinical or commercial, there's certainly relevance here. And first question is for Matthias. Just this is really exciting. Obviously our three companies are excited about this. Could you just help us understand the journey that Genpact was on the last few years, identifying the need for a solution, and how do you envision this collaboration working?
Sure. Yeah. So when we work with our clients every day, and this whole integration perspective, be it a 3PL, a CMO, or some strategic suppliers, right, has always bubbled up a lot. Like, how do we solve it, right? We had some band-aids and workarounds, right? Like, there's a concept of shadow planning where I put a bunch of assumptions in for certain suppliers, what their capacity is. If I can get a little information, great, but it was definitely not ideal, right? And then things like COVID happens, or ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal and shuts it down for several days, right? It's very hard to do proper planning when you don't have that intelligence, right? So we knew there was a white space. So we're really looking at what kind of providers are there that we could probably partner with. And the biggest challenges in life sciences, right? Highly regulated environment, right? Very sensitive information that pharma companies have. So connecting with outside entities is always seen as a big hill to climb, right, because of this concern. So when we started talking with TraceLink, what was really appealing, right, they are in the majority of life sciences company already through the track and trace solutions, right, and through the platform. This would just be basically taking those data highways and adding more data to it, right? So that was appealing, because you can get up and running a lot quicker if it's already approved by your IT system. Everyone feels comfortable. Now we're just adding some data fields, right? And then for TraceLink, their secret sauce really is managing those data connections on a continuous basis for you, so you don't have to worry about anything. And then obviously the data you can get from there, be it constraints, be it shipment statuses, et cetera, like, it makes Kinaxis so much more powerful, right? What Christy just talked about, that you can really look at your entire network. So if you have an outside supplier, you have the similar visibility than if it was on your own four walls, right? So then you really can do end-to-end planning across your entire business.
And just building off that, Christy, for you again from Kinaxis's perspective, what excites you about the partnership here?
So I think there's several things. The part that when we think about Kinaxis as a planning solution, it really you need to start thinking about it as end-to-end, as you just explained. It's not supply and demand planning. It's much bigger than that, and it extends to our customers' customers and our suppliers' suppliers. And so in order to do that, these partnerships help strengthen that, whether it's building on with a different capability that you talked about, or TraceLink bringing in that external data. We now have the visibility, and that visibility and transparency helps us plan better. It helps us drive decisions faster. And so the more visibility that we have, the better our plans are. And I think that truly starts to drive then the value back into the organization.
Excellent. And you mentioned it a few minutes ago. You mentioned it in your presentation earlier today. We've spoken about it over the last few weeks as we've had many conversations, and it's this concept of helping the industry transform from more of an inside out to outside in view of how you manage planning. So how do you see this partnership, this collaboration being able to allow companies to do that?
So, outside in is a really different way of looking at planning than what we've traditionally seen. When we're looking at outside in, we're looking at data that we typically do not have access to. It might be weather data or demographics or populations. It could be supplier data. It could be buyer trends. And how does that then come into our planning system, into one platform that we can then run and look at demand and supply? It's going to help shape our demand and supply plans so that truly we can be more customer-centric. We can be much more agile. We can adapt to what we need and really start to drive that value back to the customer by providing them solutions when they need it to what their needs are. We're anticipating versus reacting.
If I could maybe add to this, right, I think another thing to consider is the whole integration piece, right? Other industries have done it, right? I don't think there's a silver bullet, but life sciences is typically kind of more of a follower, not a leader when it comes to trends in supply chain, like automotive, right? Going actually integrating with your supply base multiple tiers down, it has been around for a long time, right? Because the entire supply chain with their suppliers needs to walk in lockstep because the margins are a lot smaller, right? You can't have huge inventories. But if you look at macro-wise within the life sciences supply chain space, right? I would like the last 10, 15 years, there's a huge amount of interest from a planning perspective, right? Most life sciences companies now have a cutting edge planning solution, right? 70% of them use Kinaxis, right? But we see really the white space right now where there's been not a lot of focus over the last 10 years that's really gaining traction now is the collaboration space. And the reason for that is, right, once you have a planning system that kind of lights everything up, you notice your dark spots, right? Your dark spots is when you go out of your own four walls. It goes when you actually switch to your clinical supply chain. So that's what we're excited for, kind of addressing some of the dark spots of your supply chain.
And I think adding on to that, if we think about the direction that planning is going, it's moving more to exception-based planning. So Maestro as a platform is very good at teeing up exceptions. But again, if those exceptions are only based on what we know in our four walls, we're somewhat limited. The more we can shape the information going in and truly get to that exception-based management, we are going to make decisions and adjustments much faster and truly have that financial impact that we're looking for.
Thank you. And so essentially what we're just been talking about is our solution, and the idea is that we're now tackling many of the challenges that we talked about in the first few minutes, right? And so the sort of the art of what's possible, right? Having unified collaboration network, full end-to-end supply chain orchestration, and allowing companies to react to problems and help resolve them more quickly, maximize agility, really just improve and allowing them again to handle many of the challenges we spoke about earlier. So companies that may be looking to get there, and the first question is for Christy again as a technology provider. What do you think companies need to be thinking about? What are some of the challenges that you've seen as companies start to look to transform their supply chain and how they plan?
Absolutely. One of the things we did when we were at our Kinaxis Connections earlier this month, we actually had a co-innovation forum with 16 of our life science customers. And we really wanted to understand what their pain points are and how we can continue to support them. But one of the sounding messages that came out throughout the 2 hours was that there's a speed to value. So for them to continue to get capital investment, they need to be able to provide that speed to value. And so when you look at the possibilities of Kinaxis or an advanced planning system or connectivity to the outside, our suggestion is really looking at where can you make an impact right away so that you can start bringing that speed to value. How do we bring the supply chain back to the table, having a voice that we do provide value and not just a cost? And when we look at it in this framework where we truly are starting to shape our demand and supply more finely, I think that value starts to come a lot faster.
Thank you. And similar for Matthias, if you could, speak to the same question and just sort of what do you see as some of the challenges or considerations that companies need to be thinking through as they're looking to get here?
Yeah. So unified collaboration network sounds scary, right? Like I have so many suppliers, right, all over the world. I don't even want to get started because it seems overwhelming, right? I think the first lesson learned is, right, this is not a big bang approach, right? We would never recommend that you go live with all your suppliers at the same time across all the different data dimension and capabilities and use cases that you're looking to solve, right? It is very much, I define my use cases, right? I pick 2 or 3 of them and I pick some, I would say, friendly suppliers, because usually you have some that are eager because you're really feeling the pain right now, right? You do a pilot, you get some wins under your belt, and then you do waves of adding additional suppliers while also addressing maybe additional use cases at the same time. I think another thing is too, like one size does not fit all, right? We talked about quality collaboration, execution collaboration, planning collaboration, right? You need to segment your supplier to figure out what they actually need, right? That doesn't mean every supplier is going to get their own customized solution, right? But what your 3PLs need, what your contract manufacturer needs, and maybe what just a strategic supplier for packaging needs is very different, right? Maybe all of them just need PO, but we need capacity information from some, right? We need a lot of shipment information from another. So kind of profiling them and grouping them together really helps you along the journey, right? Because it gives you bite-sized chunks. The other thing we also like to talk about, right, is data is not everything, right? It's table stakes. And the issue has been, so far, getting those table stakes has been very hard to get, right? Now with Mint, we have a great solution for that, right? But you have to do other things. You have to do operating model changes, ways of working, your processes, your KPIs, right? And it's not just within your own 4 walls, but it's also in your suppliers, right? That's the last piece then is change management, because it underpins all of it. It needs to be there from the beginning. We need to have a case for change for yourself, but also for your suppliers. You can approach it, what's in it for them? Then you need to guide them through the journey, which typically we do with supplier profiling, right? Where we actually sit down with the suppliers. We talk about, hey, these are the use cases we've defined for, that we want to go ahead with you, right? Does it make sense? Are you in agreement that this is viable, right? Get feedback, make them part of the process versus telling them this will happen. And then finally, as you go live, typically the first 3 months, there's a lot of hand-holding, right? Because the data will be flowing, that part will be great and ironed out. But you have to go through the new process, the new ways of working for people really to fall into that, not just in your own, kind of siloed 4 walls, but also your supplier is absolutely critical to making these programs successful. And that's a key part why Genpact is in the mix. We're sitting up here because that's what we do. That's what we bring to the table and we're very good at.
Thank you both so much. We wanted to open it up for any questions that may be out there.
This might be a little tactical question, but one of the challenges that we have experienced in the past was, or we still experience, is there is either no information flowing from, let's say, a CMO to an MAH or vice versa, or there is too much information coming from the MAH because, hey, the demand changes every day, and then it becomes too much of a noise for the other side to digest that information, and then they don't know which signal exactly to react. So what are your some thoughts on some capabilities that can be used to make sure that the right signals are passed on and they only react to the ones that are really relevant and actionable?
You're both looking at me, so I guess it's me. No, happy to answer this one. So too much information can be an issue. And that's even what I talked about now. Figuring out what KPIs you want to use, what dashboards you want to use is critical. But on the other end, right, with Kinaxis, the whole concept of exception-based planning, right? A company can possibly change the demand all the time, but if you can accommodate it, right, the system will just replan in the background. No one actually needs to touch it, right? It really it flags you the exceptions, where here's like, hey, for this recent update on the demand, we're gonna not have capacity next October, right? That's then you can start to tackle, right? But this also goes into the more operating model ways of working agreement, right? Because if you're if your customer has very bad planning on their end, right, that might be something that you need to address with them, right? Because if you're just always just on the receiving end and there's no feedback loop, so it's important when you're looking at planning, right, that you have your monthly planning cycle. Your customer is part of it, right? You have your validating meetings with them once a month where all the data is prepared, and they can help you cut through the noise, right? So collaboration is not just from a data perspective, but also on the people side as well. But great question.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.